Hello, this is Niswander, and you're watching the Nowman Show, and I'm here in Pasadena, California with Caleb Maupin. Caleb, how are you today?
I'm great. How about yourself?
I would say I'm doing great too. That's an important way to feel, right? To get started.
Yes.
You know, we may not like the way things appear, but hey, I'm great.
Yeah, me too. It's important to keep a positive outlook, and a lot of people are struggling to do that these days. But I work hard to do that and to help other people do that.
And you do a phenomenal job, so that's why I want to thank you for the time that you're taking here to have this conversation. Sure. And first of all, I like to ask people what their background is. For those of you who don't know Caleb Maupin, tell us a little bit about where you are coming from and what's going on now.
Well, I grew up in a small town in Ohio. It's called Orrville. It's where Smucker's jelly comes from. And, I got involved in political activism when I was in college. I've been in various activist groups. I was with the International Action Center, and I was their media spokesperson during Occupy Wall Street. That was started by Ramsey Clark, the former U.S. Attorney General, who became a peace activist and an international lawyer. I work in international media. I'm the New York City correspondent for RT from Russia. I report
Which stands for
Russia Today. And I covered news for them, and I'm also the founder of the Center for Political Innovation, which is an educational socialist nonprofit. We educate people about opposing war and opposing empire, and trying to bring a new perspective to anti-imperialism and socialism, looking beyond left and right, but toward what brings us together, how we can build community.
And fantastic. How long have you been working with CPI?
CPI has been around for about 3 years. Before that, we had clubs on various campuses that were called Students and Youth for a New America. Then, around the time of the pandemic, as the pandemic was coming to a close, we decided to launch the Center for Political Innovation as a formal educational think tank organization.
So is it a 501c3?
No. At this point, we are a nonprofit incorporated in the state of Oregon, and it's called CPI Education Project. Prior to that, we were a corporation in the state of New York. So yeah.
Oh, so you've gone through a transformation already.
Yeah, and we will probably take on many different stages, and we've been involved in many different projects, and our organizational form will evolve over time. One thing we really tried to do is we want to get past this notion that you have to form a party, because in the United States of America, there are two political parties, the Democrats and the Republicans. So if you go to average people and you say forming a party, they're already confused when you say you're not a Democrat or a Republican. And then when they find out you're a party, they want to know when you're on the ballot. And if you're not running candidates and you're a party, they're even more confused, right? And that this orthodoxy of we must form the party and publish the newspaper and have a leader with a certain mustache. This is kind of a stodgy old archaic way of doing things. And as we talk about socialism for the 21st century, we want to be more modern in our approach, and we aim to educate. We're not running candidates for office. We do some protesting, some mass outreach, but our main thing is to educate. We see ourselves as an educational organization. And I tell people that as things get better in this country and as we start moving towards socialism, there will probably be something like a party that comes into existence. But that party will be like an orchestra. In an orchestra, you got trombones, you got bass drums, you got harps, you got flutes, and we will be one instrument in that orchestra. Because a real revolutionary party, not only would it have people that do educational work like CPI, it'll also have labor unions, it'll have people who run for office, it'll have a newspaper, it'll have all kinds of different things. Well, we will be one part of the coalition that's eventually needed, because I really believe in this kind of educational work about anti-imperialism and getting to average people who would never go looking for this message with it. And so we want to take on that task, and we can't just wait for some organization to come along that'll allow it to do us with them. We got to just seize the moment. We got to do it, right? And I feel like that's a big problem I see in a lot of circles. There's a lot of people, it's like, oh, if we could just, we could get into the Democratic Party, if we could just take it over, or we can, there's a community radio station, we can just get our people on the board. It's like, no, just do it. Just do it. Right? There's so much that needs to be done right now. Just do it. And that's been the CPI approach, is if we want to do something, we find out what we're capable of doing, we raise the money, we find the volunteers, and we do it, right? Because people need to know the truth about what's going on. Our country is in a very severe crisis. The world is in a very severe crisis. So it's time to do something, not just to wait for all the chess pieces to align and we take over some institution. Just do it. That's my attitude.
Absolutely, I agree. And in that, I would consider that a basic overview, folks. So I want to get into more detail on the importance of CPI at this juncture in our history, because it plays a very vital role, I think, in going forward with what is happening in the world right now and how to solve the problems. And one of the things that we can get in later is that in a lot of my television show episodes, I talk about problems. And I also add to that, I say, in my own personal life, I realized that I had to understand what the problems actually are first. And I don't think a lot of people really understand what the problems are. So if that's the case, how are you going to come up with the actual solutions? So that's why it's education is important, and bringing people together and building community, and et cetera, and organizations. It's important to do that. So we can get into that more towards the end of the conversation. I think that's ultimately where we need to be going to go forward at this juncture, right? And not just in this conversation, but outside and for you as well. Now, you are in L.A. right now. I originally was thinking that, you and I probably wouldn't meet till maybe 2025, and you know what I mean? And suddenly, here we are. You're in Los Angeles now, and you're here for a specific event initially, but there's other stuff going on as well. Whatever you're comfortable sharing, what is this L.A. event that you're speaking at tonight, which is Friday, when we're speaking here now?
Well, I was invited out here by the Los Angeles Family Church, which is, that's a church from Korea, the Unification Church, because they are very dedicated to peace on the Korean Peninsula, to reunifying North and South Korea. I have been friendly with them for the last couple of years. One Sunday, in Manhattan, I showed up at their church service and I said, hey, this is who I am. I'm a reporter with RT. I run CPI, and you guys want peace with North Korea, and so do I. So let's talk. And, I've gone to a number of their workshops and been friendly with them, and they are moving ahead with their idea. They want to have the Peace Cup, which is a sports tournament connected with the United Nations, which is dedicated to using sports to bring world peace. They want to have the next Peace Cup in North Korea. And so they are kind of launching a campaign to have the U.S. government allow them to go to North Korea, because right now it's illegal to go to North Korea. They'll take your passport if you go to North Korea. Really? Yeah, I mean, it's a ridiculous rule, not constitutional at all. And on top of that, they want North Korea to invite them. And I was just at the World Youth Festival where the North Koreans were there, the Kim Il-sung youth, as well as youth from Russia and youth from all over the world. We presented the North Koreans with a booklet we wrote about our effort to build peace on the Korean Peninsula. And now I'm here in L.A. to speak at this event put on by this church about it. And I'm really, really happy for the invitation. They're amazing hosts. This is a lovely place they've got me staying. Just a beautiful, peaceful residence that they've got me staying at here. And I'm going to speak at their event tonight. And I'm really glad to be here. And the minister who's speaking, he used to be in New York City. That's how I know him. He was the minister in New York City for a while, the assistant pastor. And now he's out here in L.A. And Joshua is a good friend of mine. And he invited me, and we're going to have an event tonight about peace on the Korean Peninsula. And I think it's important because I'm going to be able to speak to people who've never heard this message before, right? This is a very conservative church, very, Republican-oriented, et cetera. And I'm obviously from a leftist background. I mean, things have gotten confusing, and I think Trump is better than Biden in a lot of ways. But my background is with the left and socialism and all of that. But we agree on this, and we agree that our society is in a crisis. We agree that Korea should be unified. And so they invited me out here, and I'm really glad to be here because this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity to make new connections.
And it's also an opportunity to, like I enjoy, and I get inspired by bringing people together. Yeah. That's one of the things I really feel I'm here to do on this planet at this juncture, and that's really important. So I'm glad that they've given you that opportunity and you've accepted it. That's very important. As of this recording, it's my understanding that according to Scott Ritter, there's only 100,000 troops in Europe right now. The U.S. only has 100,000 troops in Europe, and Biden has said something about launching missiles having Ukraine launch missiles into Russia. Can you explain what's going on with that?
Right. So the USA is supplying Ukraine with weaponry, and Ukraine has been using those weapons to attack Russia. And Biden is now escalating and saying that they have more permission to strike deeper inside Russia, to attack Russian civilians, etc. Biden is, using this song and dance about somehow Russia is going to invade all of Europe. We gotta fight them in Ukraine, or else we're gonna, they're gonna come over here, which is a ridiculous claim. Russia held off going into the eastern regions, the new republics, as long as they possibly could. The idea that they want to march into Europe and march into France and Germany is an absurd allegation. I mean, it just doesn't match reality. But that is what Biden is trying to sell us on, and this is very dangerous, and it could lead to World War III. And Russia is prepared to defend itself, and Russia is a nuclear-armed country, just like the United States. And so this is a very frightening situation. I don't think Russia is our enemy, right? Russia is not the enemy of working people in the United States. Russia is the enemy of the big oil companies that see it as a competitor, because they rebooted their economy from the fall of the Soviet Union with oil and natural gas, state control. They're cooperating with a number of different countries around the world. And, Wall Street wants to make sure that everyone buys their oil and gas from BP and Shell and Chevron and ExxonMobil. They don't want anyone buying their oil and gas from Russia or from Venezuela or from Iran or any of the independent countries. They view them as competitors. And, the U.S. government loved Russia in the 90s when it was economically destroyed and devastated. But then when Russia got back on their feet, all of a sudden they were an enemy again. And I think that this is the disastrous policy of the Biden administration. And it's done to enforce an international system called imperialism. Lenin talked about imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism, which is the rule of monopolistic corporations holding back economic development, right, and keeping the world poor so they can make themselves rich and keep themselves rich. And I think that that's what we're up against here, and that Biden is a very useful servant of imperialism, and he's escalating tensions with Russia when polls show the American people don't want that. They do not want more of a confrontation with Russia. They think we've already spent too much money on Ukraine. The overwhelming majority of Americans feel that way, that this is not in our interest to just keep pouring billions and billions of dollars worth of weaponry into Ukraine while our own country is falling apart, while the roads are crumbling. Well, I mean, this country is devastated. Why are we doing this, right? It's not in the interest of the American people.
When you were at the youth conference in Sochi, you got a question into Putin. And also many of us saw the interview that Tucker Carlson did with Putin. And I remember at one point, Putin looked at Tucker Carlson and he said, I spend half my days on domestic issues. He says, why is your country sending billions of dollars thousands of miles away? Just that alone, let alone why that was happening. And how can you look at that and not see sanity in that statement? Yeah. You know what I mean? And then you look at Biden or Trump here, and there's just like no comparison. It's almost a joke. If it like Scott Ritter, if it wasn't so serious, I'd be laughing hysterically, because it's just ridiculous. So, and then we have Israel-Palestine, which is an issue that goes back 75 years at least, and it brings back, in my experience as from a background in the Christian church, thousands of years of issues, you know what I mean? Not just 75 years. Mm-hmm. And there's a difference between a belief system and actual facts. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And it does seem like in this country that we have a problem, at least the establishment leadership has a problem with facts. And they want to focus on belief systems. And here we are, the basis of those conflicts really are, as I see it, belief systems. What do you think?
Well, I think that we have a government that is pretty much beholden to Israel at this point. Maybe when Israel started, the Western colonial powers, Britain and America, saw Israel as kind of their proxy. But at this point, it seems like Israel has a lot of its own power and influence. And it's gotten itself in a position where no one can say no to Israel. The whole world wants a ceasefire. Israel says no. They keep bombing Gaza. They keep, bombing hospitals. They keep killing children with their bombs. They keep, targeting journalists and UN workers. The whole world is just aghast at Israel's atrocities, and the United States continues to protect Israel. And Biden very well could lose the election, because Muslim Americans are a growing constituency, especially in key states like Michigan, and they're probably not going to vote for him because they see how, he's just basically giving Israel a rubber stamp to continue their crimes against the Palestinian people. And that, I mean, the amount of control and power and special treatment that Israel gets is absurd, right? In a number of U.S. states, in order to be a state employee, you must pledge that you will never boycott Israel. You must sign a document that says, I will never boycott Israel. Now, during the McCarthy period, they made it so you had to sign you were loyal to this government, this country. But could you imagine? You have to sign loyalty to a foreign government in order to be a state employee in Georgia and a number of other U.S. states. This is absurd, right? There's a law in the United States, which most countries have, which is that if you fight in a foreign country's army, you lose your citizenship, right? Because, you can only fight in the army of your own country. Well, we have a special exception for Israel. Americans can go fight in a foreign army and not lose their citizenship. And, I mean, we give billions of dollars to Israel every year, and in light of recent events, we've just piled on more and more money. And it's crazy. And it appears that Israel really wants to get the United States involved in a wider war with Iran, right? They attacked the Iranian, embassy in Syria and the consulate and killed a number of Iranian government officials. They continue to target allies and friends of Iran throughout the region. And it seems like Netanyahu, his position in Israel is precarious at this point, and that he's facing opposition from more moderate forces within the Israeli government. And I think he's determined to secure his grip on power by keeping the crisis that has been going on between Israel and Palestine since October 7th, keeping that going as long as possible and escalating it into as big of a confrontation as he possibly can. And it's embarrassing for the United States. And I think as an American patriot, I would have to look at this and say, to see that another country just has its grip over the United States of America is infuriating. I mean, it's bad enough, what you described earlier and what Tucker Carlson, was pointed out, had pointed out by Putin about how we spend billions of dollars while our own country is crumbling. But now to have another country, that has so much power and influence that it gets such special treatment and no one in our political establishment can say no to it. Republican, Democrat, it's like a rule. You're not allowed to say no to Israel. This is not good. This is not healthy, and I'm not an advocate of any kind of racism, I've studied the writings of Karl Marx, who was Jewish, and, Lenin was Jewish, and I don't hold anyone's ethnicity or religious background against them. But I do think that the way Israel has conducted itself is absolutely outrageous, and that a lot of Americans feel that our continued funding of what Israel is doing is making us complicit with genocide. And I think they're right. What Israel is doing is absolutely criminal and must be opposed. And the fact that our government gives that priority over the domestic needs of the American people is not acceptable. One thing it's worth pointing out is, here in the United States, we're constantly being told we don't have the money to provide services for the people here. We don't have the money to provide education. We don't have the money to build roads.
Thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah. Israel has free health care for all of their citizens, and we give them billions of dollars. So we don't have enough money to give our own people health care, but we have enough money to give Israel's people health care. This is not logical, right? There's many examples of this. You can talk about how the FBI has gone after anti-Israel protesters in the United States as a way to help Israel. In 2010, there was a raid on the homes of various anti-Israel activists in the Chicago area. Razmia Oda, a Palestinian activist, was dragged to prison and horrendously treated. And there's many examples of how the U.S. government just bends over backwards to please and assist and aid Israel while forgetting about the American people. And I think that's something I'm not in favor of.
And that's where the majority view would be. And so thank you for saying that on this show. Yeah. What would you say that I talk to people myself with a lot of different political perspectives. I grew up around mostly conservative people, but have, as I've gotten into politics, which, by the way, I must clarify, I think I've said this on my show before, but I'm not really interested in politics, to be honest. But I'm much less interested in being ignorant of politics and what's going on in the world and how that affects my life and the lives of others. So if that tells you, it's important to pay attention to these issues and to be knowledgeable so that you can make real decisions for yourself. Critical thinking skills are necessary as you go through life anyway, right? So I talk to people that are more right-leaning, as you do, and on this issue, sometimes the conversation gets shut down. And So what would you say to somebody, for instance, that would say to you, yeah, but what about all those Palestinians are being killed because Hamas uses them as human shields, and they're all hiding in the tunnels, or as a real life example, I won't mention a name, somebody who said if Israel were to lay down their arms, they would be slaughtered. They'd be gone from the face of the earth. But if Hamas laid down its arms, the whole thing would be over. I've actually heard somebody say that in a church, Christian church. So what would you just say to somebody like that with those kinds of views?
Well, I mean, there's a couple historical precedents. I mean, that's a catchy phrase someone can use, but it doesn't capture the essence of the situation. First of all, there's all this talk of Israel being wiped off the map, Israel, et cetera. Well, there was a country called Rhodesia that was much like Israel in that it was a country named after Cecil Rhodes, the British colonizer, in which the white Europeans had rights and the black people didn't have rights. And there was an uprising, the Civil War and all of that, and Rhodesia was wiped off the map. And what was the result? Well, farmland was redistributed, but was there mass slaughter and death of white people in Zimbabwe? Of course not. No. The Dutch East Indies, I think, is what I believe was Indonesia used to be called. I think so. Yeah, and it was wiped off the map, and we now have Indonesia. And did that result in all kinds of Dutch people being killed? No, it just resulted in a new government that represented all the people there. And I think that is ultimately, those who talk about a one-state solution, that's what they want. They want one state for all the people living in that area that represents all of them, not just one race. And Israel is set up to be a country for one race, one ethnic group, one religion. It is a country for Jews. There are non-Jewish citizens, but it's a country for Jews, and thus the Palestinians are not citizens of that state, and they don't have rights. And so, the idea of Israel being quote-unquote wiped off the map, that would result in it being replaced with some kind of government in which all the people were represented. It would, and I don't think that would result in mass genocide, right? I just don't think that's the case. That said, though, I don't know how likely it is that Israel will just fold, right? I mean, I think a two-state solution may be more realistic than a one-state solution. But those who advocate a one-state solution are not advocating mass extermination of Jews. They're advocating the end of a state that serves one particular group. Now, as far as the whole thing about laying down their arms, Israeli politicians are openly talking about forcibly, removing all of the Palestinians from Gaza. They're talking about that. That's openly being discussed. So, if anything, it would be if Hamas laid down their arms, the Palestinians would be just wiped out. Whereas at this point, I believe the majority of Palestinian folks, especially in the West Bank, are in favor of a two-state solution. They don't want to just completely get rid of Israel as a state. Now, obviously, that's not Hamas's position. Hamas is for one state, but, Fatah and other groups among the Palestinians are for two states. So the person who said that is just misrepresenting the situation. We have Israeli politicians openly talking about just forcibly removing all the Palestinians, which they've been gradually doing year after year after year with the settlement encroachments, et cetera. So Israel is the one that is openly talking about just completely wiping out the other side and is actively doing it. And among the Palestinians, you have an opposition to the idea of an Israeli state, but you have many who agree that an Israeli state needs to exist, but they want their own state as well. So that's just not the reality of the situation on the ground, but it's a catchy thing to say, right? And when someone hits you with a catchy phrase, it can be hard to come back from that because it sounds so catchy, right? It's so concise, but it just doesn't match the reality of the conflict.
And that exactly sums it up. It doesn't match the reality of the conflict. So thank you, because that's important to have that conversation. So and to share information like that. So when we do talk to people, we will have the right words to say that they may not resolve the conflict in the conversation or whatever, but it might. Like for instance, I'll share a little COVID story. Mm-hmm. At the very beginning of COVID, there was a lot of discussion in Facebook. This is before the real censorship started happening, and I saw a thread where people were just obviously were very concerned and worried about the vaccines coming out, with the uncertainty of it all, and then this one girl chimed in and she said, "Oh, come on, people. why would they want to kill us all? That's just ridiculous, you know? And so I felt, you know, I needed to say something. I needed to post something in there. And I said, okay, point well taken. Why would they want to kill every single one of us? I said, but however, that doesn't mean they're not looking to make a lot of new customers. And she came back almost immediately and said in the post, oh, I didn't even think about that. Thank you for giving me a different point of view. So, and I had no idea that I would get that kind of immediate response. So I know that there are those times in real time, in social media, where you can get some kind of a positive reaction from someone, or just add to the conversation, maybe, you know, and I get that too from some things people share in social media. You know, oh, I didn't think about that. You know, and that helps, you know, I should say, have an enlightening moment, regardless of what the issue might be.
Well, you can go back to, I think, in the late 1700s, there was a writer named Robert Malthus, and he looked at the French Revolution happening across the Channel. He was in England, and he said, oh, well, the French Revolution happened because there's too many people, and that this is called overpopulation. And he wrote this essay called The Principle of Population Growth, where he argued that every effort needed to be made to not prolong the life of the poor. And to have the poor die sooner in order to keep the population low, in order to have stability in society. And then we later know that you know, in the late 1800s, the Neo-Malthusian Society was very popular among many of the wealthiest people in Britain. And they thought that all these problems of unemployment and labor strikes and uprisings, they said, well, this isn't the problem of capitalism. This is just there's too many people. And the phrase "useless eaters" was widely, you know, promoted. And the idea was that there are too many people in the world. There's overpopulation. I know Margaret Sanger, who was a feminist and a socialist activist. She, after the Russian Revolution, she saw that the Soviet Union was not the free sex, free love paradise she was hoping for. And so she became a Malthusian. And during the Great Depression, she went around saying that the Great Depression was caused by overpopulation. And she, you know, she spoke at Ku Klux Klan meetings. She argued that birth control and abortion could be used to eliminate certain races and certain ethnic groups, and that she went from being a socialist to being, you know, a far-right racist and such, because she bought into this idea that we need to reduce the population. There are too many people in the world, and that is how many of the richest people in the world feel. And I don't think that's hard to discover, and it's not conspiratorial. The idea that they're all sitting up there in a smoke-filled room plotting to kill the whole human race, I don't buy, right? That would obviously be crazy. But the idea that many of them believe that the problem facing the world is there are too many people and that there's too much growth, that is being widely promoted. That is almost the party line in the United States. And it's wrong. It's not true, right? You know, I mean, the human race, human beings are the source of all wealth. We're not useless eaters. Human beings are the creators of all the value that exists in the world. And with human beings, we can advance. And you know, people talk about limited resources. This is a very common thing I hear from people. Well, you know, it's true that there are limited resources in the world. And, you know, if we were still burning wood to heat our homes, we would have deforested the planet centuries ago. But we don't. We started burning coal, and now we burn natural gas. We have electrical heat. And that the whole history of the human race is our reinvention of our relationship with nature, right? When one fuel source, one energy source, one mode of production becomes outmoded, we reach a higher plane. And that's why China is putting so much money and funding into fusion energy research right now, because fossil fuels has its limitations. The first book we ever published was The Green Book by Muammar Gaddafi. A number of books, you know, about socialism in the United States, socialist history, about economics.